Powerful reasons. You guys have powerful reasons like what?
Yeah, we're starting a podcast. I wouldn't miss, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I wouldn't miss. What's good, everybody? This is your boy Berger from the 015 Voice Podcast, and I'm with our guest, Mr. Brett, and he'll be telling us his story. So, Mr. Brett, tell us, why are you here?
I'm here because I'm the publisher of Cannabis Africa, which is a breaking news service for the cannabis industry that's emerging in Africa. And we are sitting on the cusp of a revolution where this plant has the potential to transform millions of people's lives. And we're sitting in an amazing place where we are the only country in the world that has a national cannabis master plan. And government is involved in trying to bring illegal farmers into the mainstream, bring the healing powers of cannabis to the public of South Africa. It's a bit of a tricky road because it's all new stuff, but this is really, really exciting times for all of us to be living in.
Really? So, tell me here, are you planning to have farms of cannabis?
Not for me myself, but you know what is really interesting is in the consulting work I've done with government. By their own estimation, there are 700,000 illegal cannabis farmers, mostly in Mpondo land, and there are about 3.5 million consumers of cannabis on a regular basis. And from my point of view, my perspective is I'm a content guy. I like the news side of things. I'm not really a cultivator. I'm not looking to try and make money out of cannabis through cultivation or any other part of the value chain. I'm fascinated by the plant. I'm fascinated by the potential that it has, not just from recreational cannabis, which everybody thinks about it, but really from a hemp side of things, from a medicinal cannabis side of things. You know, there's the most amazing tender that's just been put out by the Gauteng government, which is to call for hemp to be grown on old mine dumps, because hemp is a very good heavy metals extractor. It pulls the poison out of the earth, and then you can turn that hemp into hempcrete to make building blocks out of, to build houses. And so the power of the plant is way beyond just the medicinal or the recreational element of it. It actually has the potential to become a whole new sunrise industry in this country, like the automobile industry or anything else. And I think where we are very fortunate is that our government has seen the vision, where we are very unfortunate is they don't have a clue as to how to get there.
Really? So since you mentioned it's gonna benefit the people, how is it gonna benefit them?
So first of all, there are three different kinds of cannabis sectors that we should be looking at. There's medicinal cannabis, and so you can get a license to cultivate and export medicinal cannabis, and that's a job creator, it's a big high revenue earner, but unfortunately it's restricted to those people who have got deep pockets. And actually my main criticism of the South African cannabis regime right now is it favors big business and it favors big pharmaceutical companies, and it's not really helping the person who is who are legacy growers, who are people who've, you know, we're sitting on an industry that has been going for 500, 600, 700 years in this country, long before colonialism. Prohibition has really been a recent thing. And what we wanted to look at doing is to just get back to where people who are able to make a living by growing cannabis like they have for hundreds of years, and for us to have a legal regime where you can sell it like a vegetable or a fruit that it's graded. But sorry, I come back to the three three legs to the cannabis industry. One is medicinal. You can get a license for export only. Second is hemp, which is to grow. There are all sorts of applications from hemp, from animal foodstuffs to building blocks to all sorts of food. And then the third is what's called recreational adult use, which is just like everybody wants to get stoned. So that's cool. That's
you say
all right.
You mentioned animals. You also give animals.
Yeah, so they've had this study that was done in the Western Cape this year, where they fed chickens hemp seed, and they produced bigger, more nutritious eggs than being fed ordinary seed. So we're only starting to scratch the surface of the plant. And it's been around, ironically, for 11,000 years. There's been documentation of humans using cannabis. But because of the sort of negative publicity of basically fascist governments throughout the world, it's been driven underground. And we're at the place now where we are now rediscovering the benefits of this plant in all its uses.
But have you realized how people think cannabis is bad? Have you realized?
Yeah, and also I'm a fan of cannabis. I'm a regular consumer. I love it, but I realize that it's not for everybody. But I think where the real danger is that it's been proven that cannabis in adolescence can halt brain development or lead to schizophrenia. And so I lived in Swaziland in the old days, and they had a view there that you could only smoke weed after you were 40 years old. Otherwise, it was disrespectful. It was a thing that came with age. I think that's not a bad thing.
Really? So which age do you think it's good for you to smoke?
I think after 23 or 24 years old, when your brain is developed, you're not going to get the harms that might be associated with it.
Oh, so it does have some few harms.
It does have harms in brain developments, and it brings out what's already in there. If you're a schizophrenic person, it will enhance that.
Oh yeah.
And so, but we only really the positives far outweigh the harms. And there are three areas where cannabis, especially CBD, which is the low THC, and as THC and CBD, as you know, are some of the 200 compounds in cannabis. But CBD is found to combat anxiety, nausea, and help people sleep. And so there are lots and lots of benefits. Especially the treatments for epilepsy, especially in children. And I think what is exciting is that as we start accepting the fact that this plant has so many benefits, and we start getting away from the stigma of it and seeing that it's associated with crime or social dysfunction, and we start seeing that the health benefits and the overall benefits that the plant can give us in a kind of regulated environment, then it's a very exciting thing. And I think that what's amazing for me is that it's not a party political issue in this country. It's nobody's opposing this, and we've just got to get ourselves together and create a hemp industry, create a medicinal cannabis industry, and just open it up and legalize so that everybody who's selling a matchbox on the corner is legal through to a farmer in the Transkei. There should be the police should be out of the system.
Oh yeah. So since you're doing this campaign, how are you planning to go forward with it?
My business is really an information business. So I'm doing my job if I'm keeping on top of things and letting everybody know what is happening in the industry. And my main job going forward is to tackle stupidity. And unfortunately, we are in an environment where there's a lot of stupidity at play. And I'll give you one good example around cannabis. We want to develop a hemp industry in this country. And hemp has the potential to do, as I was saying, to be into animal feed or construction or foodstuffs generally. And now South Africa is an amazing place because every cannabis plant has THC. And in Southern Africa, we can't help it. The sunlight, the environment, the climate just makes our THC spike. And government has set the rules for hemp to be less than 0.2% THC. Otherwise, it then becomes seen as a narcotic and it can be destroyed. And there's no reason why we should set the level so low. Government's own advisors saying set the level at 1% THC because the stuff's going to be used for animal food stuff. It doesn't matter about that. But somehow we've gone and cut and pasted from some other country a silly law that is going to be challenged in court and that is just setting everybody back. And I think that is a frustration of people like me in the industry who just see that the potential of it, and we see that government officials who just don't understand it and can't embrace it like they are in Mexico, Colombia, the United States, Canada. It's not like we're out there by ourselves.
Do you think, is it just how they're just trying to shut down doors for other people to make money out of it? Because it seems like obviously they know it will make a lot of money.
I think this is one of the classic examples of white monopoly capital. I'm always suspicious of that the concept, but the licensing regime right now in South Africa You can only get a license to export cannabis if you've already built the facility. And because it has to be to EU standards, it's going to cost you 15 to 20 million rand to build a facility. So it's only people who've got big pockets or big pharmaceutical companies actually have the resources to get licenses. So there are 80 licenses have been issued in the country so far for medicinal cannabis export, and they're all big pharmaceutical companies. And I think the big danger in this country is that we are just playing into the hands of capital, and we are marginalizing the legacy farmers, the people who've actually created the cannabis industry in this country, who've got the knowledge, the indigenous skill sets, and who use it as their livelihood. And the terrifying thing is that as we legalize cannabis, they are going to be marginalized as the law stands right now.
Yeah, that's true. So how are you gonna like tackle it? Because it seems like it needs a big bag.
Well, I think we've been in discussion with people, stakeholders, and there's a guy called Sibusiso Tzaba who's quite an astute commentator on cannabis, and he says we should make it an election issue for 2024. Go to the ANC or to the opposition parties and say put cannabis on the agenda, because there's a lot of voters there. I mean, Joe Biden has just seen in the United States. He had he went really pro cannabis in the last 6 weeks. And that swung a bit of a vote his way, and I think that we are a cannabis nation. We are the fourth biggest producer of illicit cannabis in Africa. We produce something like 27 billion rand a year of cannabis that's produced in South Africa, of which 26 billion is illegal, and all of that is finding its way into the hands of criminal syndicates. It's not the farmers in Transkei or Pondoland who are getting the money for it. It's the middlemen, and they're basically criminal syndicates who are in human trafficking and other drugs. And I think the challenge, if you ask me what can I do, is if I can try and get, as my own personal mission, the South African police services and the criminal justice system out of the cannabis environment. And if there are issues, it should be a health or social welfare thing, and get the Department of Trade and Industry to just open it up. We should be exporting cannabis to the States. We should be just making money out of this for everybody.
Yeah, for everybody, because wow, it will make like a lot of money, more than many foods, for sure.
Yeah, we could. I mean, the money's already being made.
Yeah.
We just have to create a framework so that it can be made legally.
Oh yeah, because I realize there are people who are selling it legally on the streets, and they are making a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I always think, how come the government doesn't think to do it? Because obviously it will help our economy. So
I'll tell you this.
Yeah.
I think that one of the problems with legalizing cannabis in South Africa is that there are vested interests in the criminal justice system who are being paid bribes, and they want to slow down the legalization because that will affect their livelihood. You don't have to watch Netflix to know that if there's a 27 billion rand a year industry, how many cops are being paid off for the stuff to be exported? How many people in the criminal justice system are getting bribes on the side in order to look the other way? And I think that is the biggest challenge in South Africa, is that there are so many people who are on the take, and they are vested in not letting it be legalized because they'll lose their livelihoods.
Yeah, that's true, because most of people jump borders to go fetch it cheap and bring it inside here, and then they sell it, then they make money. So obviously there's bribe involved.
They have to pay the cops off.
Obviously there's been bribe.
There was a case last year where the police officer at Lusikisiki police station was bust escorting dacha dealers out of Transkei. There was a blue light convoy with all them all going off to deliver to Port Edward or somewhere like that. So the government is highly involved, not officially, but
secretly. There's
a corruption. I mean, we are a gangster state, and why should we think that cannabis is any different?
Yeah. So what attracted you into cannabis industry?
Well, first of all, I come from a journalistic background, and I love content and I love stories. And as cannabis started becoming legalized, and all these businesses started coming in, it's like this cowboy frontier news environment that started happening. And there are just such brilliant stories around it. And I think that I love the story of cannabis because it's partly underground, we're an intersection of technology, money, pleasure, medicine, food. All these things come together, and there are also all these crazy guys and people who are attracted to it. So from a content point of view, the cannabis environment is just it's a beautiful content space. Plus I love the plants, and plus I'm intrigued by the fact that that it's also on a cusp of scientific discovery. We're only just starting to learn about it now and all its uses. And I think the big thing is that we've got to get over the stigma of it, and people have got to realize that it's not just about, it's not an association with crime or social dysfunction. There's a lot of benefit to it, and we should be following the lead of places like Jamaica, where they've got a national Ganja campaign with a new anthem, and they're kind of getting everybody into realizing that the plant is about science, it's about health, it's about medicine, their careers in it. And I really think it could be a real big game changer for South Africa if we legalize it in the right way. We exported it, we legalized the domestic market, we had a hemp industry, and we just stopped criminalizing people who just try to make a living.
Yeah, that's true. I heard in Jamaica there's also like a tea bag out of cannabis. Is it true?
That's true. There's they're actually selling them in South Africa at the moment. There's a company called Good Leaf that is selling CBD sachets. It's all happening there. The main problem that we have to do right now is change the word of the Drug and Drug Trafficking Act to remove cannabis as a definition of narcotic and make it an agricultural crop. As soon as cannabis is out of the Drug and Drug Trafficking Act, that means banks can invest in the industry. It takes away the criminality, and unfortunately, it's still there and defined in the act. And until that happens, we're really going to be a stop-start kind of industry.
Yeah. So when you like drink it with tea, doesn't it like affect you some way somehow?
There are many different compounds in cannabis, and the two main ones are THC, which is the compound that gets you stoned, and CBD, which is more of a relaxer. So if you have CBD infused products, that kind of calms you down and makes you
Just
more relaxed, and it's not psychoactive. Whereas the THC is what makes you stoned and makes you creative or paranoid or whatever it does. But everybody's got to find their own relationship with the plant.
But it seems like it knocks you down very, very hard when you drink it, because I think the better way maybe it's when you smoke it, but drinking it goes straight into your...
I can't comment. There's so many different types of cannabis. There's basically, as we know, there's indica and there's sativa. Sativa is more of an energizing cannabis, and indica is more of a relaxing one. And then there are all these sorts of hybrids. And so, as connoisseurs would say, there's a wake and bake smoke that will keep you energized right through the day. But if you smoke the wrong thing in the morning, you'll sleep all day.
How do you know? How do you know this is? How do you differentiate them?
I've had the fortune of being with a cannabis consultant who's helped me understand what my own profile is in terms of cannabis, because it never puts me to sleep.
Really?
It energizes me and it makes me want to go. And that's because I choose a certain type of strain, and I understand my body's reaction to it.
I just want to know, how do you differentiate? This one is gonna get me to sleep. This one is gonna like push me out of the day, because they look the same.
They look the same. So sativa is more of an energizing one, and indica is more of a relaxing one. And what's happening right now is that most of the South African cannabis land races are mostly high in sativa. So Durban Poison, Transkei, Rooibart, and all those are very much energizing forms of cannabis, and that's why there's so much in demand in the rest of the world. And that is what's crazy for me. I'm sorry, I'm jumping the subject slightly, but we are sitting with the most famous cannabis brands in the world, and there's no way that we can register Durban Poison as a brand, or Transkei Gold, or anything like that. And if government had the imagination and the creativity, they could enable us and empower us to register our own intellectual property in cannabis land races, and then put aside money for research and development to find out which are the ones that put you to sleep, or which are the ones that wake you up, and because it's all still new to us.
Have you ever came across to this name, space cookies? Have you ever heard them?
I've heard there's a big controversy in Gauteng at Leondale High School, where a whole lot of space cookies, which are cannabis cookies or cakes, which are made and distributed to pupils, and they all got completely stoned, and it's terrible. And but one of the things that's very interesting is that edibles are going to rival combustibles in the next 5 years in cannabis consumption. Smoking is going more and more and more out of fashion, and people are ingesting cannabis through other ways, and cookies and edibles are becoming more and more popular. And so, space cookies, anything that you're cooking or making out of cannabis that you don't know what's in it is always, a bit dangerous. But as long as you know what is in it and you know what the effect of it is, it's for you to enjoy, but it should not. It should be taken away from children. It's not good.
Yeah, it's not good. Since you mentioned, you said you started. Is it 40? At age 40?
No, I started in my early 20s, but in Swazi culture, they say that it's cannabis is wasted on the youth. It's something for the elders only.
How many joints do you take a day?
Hey, I don't know if I should be saying that, but giving it away. But several. I'd like to start the day with one and pace myself through the day.
With more like 5.
Slightly upwards of that.
Wow. But it never affects you.
No, it does affect you. It affects one's memory sometimes, and that. And it's a different discipline that. You see, I'm fortunate in that I work in the creative capacity. I write stories. I write about cannabis, and smoking it doesn't affect my ability to be cognizant or write stories. If I was a heavy machine operator or a brain surgeon, I couldn't be doing this stuff, or a Lufthansa pilot. So it's strokes for folks, and I wouldn't advocate to anybody, my kind of lifestyle or take that at their risk.
Okay, I get it. So if the government has made it, maybe like gave you the power to to distribute cannabis and do all these campaigns, how would you distribute it to the people, into the communities, and give the communities advices?
Okay, so first thing I would say is that nobody needs a license to grow cannabis. You need a license if you claim that it's going to cure epilepsy or help you sleep or whatever. So I would like to see the development of a whole of provincial hubs of processing cannabis. So anybody can supply those people with cannabis, and that hub has to have the license then, and they can distribute through medicinally or recreationally or whatever. But I think the thing is to make it as easy as possible for people to grow cannabis and to distribute it. And then I'd bring in a grading system, like vegetables. A grade is indoor, B grade is greenhouse, C grade is outdoor, and then you start trying to develop a pricing mechanism so that I know if I'm buying a matchbox from you, I'm not being ripped off because that's C grade and that's at whatever rand it is. But I think what I would really be, if I was the government, I'd legalize everything tomorrow, domestic use, and I'd start encouraging research and development and say, right guys, how do we get our cannabis into New York City, into Canada, into Czechoslovakia, into Germany? Because we are world famous for our weed.
Yeah, that's true. So in this campaign, how many are you, and who are the people you are working with?
Hey, we have a loose, informal network of people, but for me at Cannabis Africa, I'm a one-man band. I mean, I have a network of contributors and that, but it's the industry really does need one overall organization that brings in government, that brings in community organizations, that brings in the private sector to help start developing policy and to take, because there are serious issues. One of the issues is that if you plant hemp, which is low THC, in Mpondo land, it's going to cross-pollinate with the high THC Mpondo land plants, and the hemp is going to go up in THC, the Mpondo land plants are going to go down in THC, and it's going to just be a problem for everybody. So there's a lot of thinking that needs to go into policy to say, right, why don't we just do hemp in the Kalahari or Northern Cape in those dry conditions, and don't risk cross-pollinating our high THC recreational cannabis, which is mostly grown in Mpondo land.
I heard in Jamaica, kids, let me say teenagers started at a young age to smoke. What's your comment on that?
See, I think as long as you keep it underground and as long as you ban it, you'll encourage kids to do it, because kids are like that. If you ban something, They want to try it.
They want to try it.
So I think my view is that it should be legalized, and there should be an educational campaign that goes along with it, and to take the kind of rebelness away from it. But it is a very, very real issue of children taking cannabis, and it could affect them, the high THC stuff, before the age of 23, 24 years old. But at the same time, it's very interesting, especially in what used to be Transkei, is how children who have been taught in how to grow cannabis by their parents, those skills are passed on from generation to generation. And they're not the ones the kids who've been working with cannabis all their lives aren't the ones who are abusing it.
Yeah, that's true. Because in most countries, they do it like we do it with morogo, spinach. Have you realized it? They do it for themselves, bake it, cook it, then they even treat it maybe to heal their wounds. Headaches, relaxation, as you say. So I think the government should.
The real problem where cannabis is in Nyopi. And that is now getting out of hand, where cannabis is part of a cocktail of drugs. And I think especially in poor communities, people, it's difficult to deal with reality if you're poor, and if there's cheap stuff that gets you stoned. I think there's a substance abuse crisis that's in the making in this country, that is around the availability of street drugs and heroin and nyopi and the sort of tramadol and the cough syrups and that. And there are all these new drugs that are being made. And I think the sooner that we get cannabis seen as an agricultural commodity and not as a drug, it'll help us treat proper drug addiction and things, and remove cannabis into a different zone.
How do you think these things can be taken out of the streets? How do you think they can take it out?
I don't think you'll ever be able to solve a drug problem. I think that people have a need for escape and fantasy, and I think that there's a very interesting correlation to be tried to understood between the relationship between poverty and substance abuse. And I think until we crack poverty, we'll never get rid of substance abuse.
Oh, okay. So do you think cannabis is the best thing you can use to treat yourself when maybe you're depressed or you're sad?
Well, I can't talk for anybody else, but for me, it helps me with my anxiety. It helps me keep a lid on things. It enables me to be creative. It gives me a perspective of life that is beyond just my own selfish ego. But I also have to admit that maybe I smoke cannabis because I'm partly addicted to tobacco, which I smoke it with. But I have to be very careful because I love the plant and I love the feeling that it does, that I get from it. And I love the potential that it has to transform society. But I would be the last person to say you must try it or you must do this. It's everybody for themselves.
Oh yeah, that's good. So what's your comment on alcohol and dacha now? Because it seems like it's really damaging the country, and it's something that the government is not doing anything about it.
Well, I think we really do have an alcohol issue in this country. I think that we drink ourselves crazy generally, and we saw through lockdown how government tried to control people's drinking habits, and actually, it did have a material effect when people were not allowed, did not have access to alcohol. It brought road deaths down and hospital admissions down. But I think that there are two things about alcohol and cannabis, and I think that one, we could use the laws around alcohol to use those for cannabis as well. So around laws around drinking and driving, or advertising, or keeping it away from children. So I think the alcohol industry provides the cannabis industry with a lot of laws that we could use that would protect kids and regulate the industry. But again, I go back to this this thing about, I think our issue in this country is poverty, and I think that poverty leads to people needing to escape their situation, and I think anything from alcohol to drugs, we will always be partial to that as a country, while we have the kind of levels of poverty that we do here. It's you're not going to solve alcohol or drug issues through prohibition. You're going to solve them through awareness and education and trying to remove the stigma and make people aware that it's not doing you any good if you're harming yourself like you are with alcohol or drugs.
Yeah, and the other thing, since the government built taverns and shipping near the many villages where mostly there's poverty and mostly where these problems come, don't you think it's the government which is like the cause of all these things at first?
Yeah, you see, I think that the problem with the government is that it doesn't understand the people that it represents. And I think that if the government, if the ANC had to stop trying to control everything and allow the people to liberate themselves and to stop trying to be the development state where you're in charge of everything, I think that would be a big step in allowing people to find their own ways, I suppose. So I think one of the problems that we have in South Africa is that we have a government that thinks it can control everything and it can't. And I think it should step back and allow people to control themselves. And that sounds simple and easy, and I know it's not that easy. But I think that there should be less regulation and from the government and more trust in people.
So do you think we'll survive these 10 years from now on with this kind of a system?
No, we will always survive. And I think that from a cannabis perspective, I think in 5 years' time, we'll be looking at a completely different situation. I think it's going to be a big business, a big industry then. I'm very optimistic for 5 to 10 years' time about how cannabis has the potential to actually become a poverty eradicator in South Africa. But I think until such time as the government understands how to regulate it, what to encourage, what to discourage, we're going to go through a few years of muddle until we get there. But I have no doubt that if we sit here in 5 years' time talking, you'll say to me, wow, look what happened.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so.
The day we were at your place, you mentioned this other way which you can like distribute cannabis by coming into the resort and like renting, then you'll be like giving to the people a bag.
Okay.
Yeah. Tell us about it.
So I'm running Kingswalden Lodge, and we pioneering this concept of cannabis tourism or canna tourism. And right now it's illegal to trade in cannabis or cannabis products, but it's not illegal to give somebody a free sample. So we build into the price. We grow it ourselves, but we build into the price of the accommodation enough for 5 grams of a free sample for anybody to have. And because we're not charging anybody for it, it's perfectly legal. And what we are looking to do is to see what's been happening in the United States and Canada as to how, as it becomes legal, travelers are interested in the experience. And I think that cannabis has a big potential to transform rural areas and to create them into tourism hotspots. I mean, Mpondoland, Transkei, parts of Mpumalanga, parts of Limpopo, they're off the beaten track, but they're perfect for doing cannabis tourism, of being able to go and it lends itself to engaging with local communities, and there's a whole different thing that could be developed out of this that we are only now starting to see the potential of.
Oh, so this means it can increase the tourism.
Yeah, I think that there's I was speaking to the head of the South African Tour Services Association, David Frost, the other day, and he thinks that cannabis tourism could be a niche tourist thing like hunting tourism. So hunting, we've got a 2 billion rand a year industry. Cannabis could be a 2 to 3 billion rand a year industry. If you imagine that people can go for cannabis tours in Transkei and Ponderland, or that Cape Town's like becomes the Amsterdam of Africa, or that you can partake in of it, and people who can grow and supply the tourism industry, and it's an advantage that we have that the rest of the world is very interested in. I mean, if you think of people coming from more repressed countries and who are interested in cannabis, to come to a place like this and to have Kingswalden to the Kruger Park, and we're a good place.
And Limpopo will benefit really big because here we are like we're investing more in agriculture, and to bring cannabis, it was gonna be a huge thing.
It's already been grown out there. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a bit of a relationship with the former finance minister, Tito Mboweni, who comes to
Yeah.
Kingswalden sometimes. And it was
Really?
he was trying to drive cabinet to legalize it and tax it. And he
Yeah.
said he reckoned that the Treasury could earn 4 billion rand if they just taxed at 15% VAT of Transkei alone.
Oh, yeah.
And he was saying it's already been grown out here in the hills, there off Galaka or Lekalametsi and those areas. And if you just legalize it and you allow people to trade in it, then you can tax it, and then the government gets something from it.
Wow, that's a lot of bag. So what's the problem with the government actually? What's the problem actually?
The problem is that the government is dysfunctional.
Yeah.
So we've had President Ramaphosa say in a State of the Nation address in February this year that he wants to fast track a change in the system so that cannabis can be commercially traded.
Yeah.
The problem is that there are people in the Justice Department, and I'll name the principal enemy of the cannabis industry right now is our Justice Minister, Ronald Lamola.
Yeah.
And he's the main guy who's stopping us from changing the laws to allow for a regulated trade in cannabis. He wants to keep it in the criminal justice system,
Yeah.
and that is preventing us from actually getting a cannabis economy off the ground and bringing everybody into the mainstream. So I think the biggest problem right now is that government has to just get its own story in alignment.
Yeah.
They've got to persuade the guys in Justice Department to say, look at the potential that this can have. Stop thinking of it as something that is it's like the Justice Department sees dacha as a narcotic, as a crime, and they can't get out of that mindset.
No.
And I think that until such time as the Department of Trade and Industry, which wants to legalize it tomorrow, until such time as they persuade the Department of Justice to come across to their side of thinking, we're going to struggle.
No, okay. So in closing, I'll ask you this question. Actually, you just finished. Brett is finished.
Brett
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Brett is passionate about cannabis, anxious about the future, hopeful of where this country can go to, excited about being part of Limpopo. And it's all this kaleidoscope of things that past the pandemic, there's no rules anymore. There's no certainty. And Brett is like happy, fearful, anxious, and expectant, and full of
Yeah.
love.
Yeah, it's a top G. Brett is a top G from my side.
Thank you very much, and thank you for
Yeah.
hosting me and being interested in this conversation.
Yeah. No, thank you. So if people want to find you somewhere, how can people find you?
First of all, just look at cannabizafrica.com, cannabis-africa.com. All my contact details are there. But yeah, just Google me and you'll find me.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
for having me.
Okay.
We're done. I think even the weather is trying to disrupt us.